The Boston Celtics were pretty comfortably the best team in the NBA over the second half of last season. After an 18-21 start, they turned things around in a major way, winning 33 of their last 43 games with a net rating of 8.5 points. The driving force behind this dominance was their play on the defensive side of the ball, embodying what it means to be a near-flawless defense in the modern era. They've got multiple guys capable of defending at the point of attack, and each offer a different set of physical and athletic tools that allow them to bother just about any different type of offense coming from the perimeter. Al Horford came in as a big who's involved in almost every screening action, and because of his combination of positioning and mobility, there's no shortage to the types of coverages that they can throw at ball handlers. And because they have both elite perimeter defense and a versatile pick and roll defender in the middle, that allows Robert Williams to do what he does best: roam near the paint and alter attempts at the rim. He's arguably the league's most effective shot blocker, with timing, ball targeting, and a ridiculous second jump that helped him block almost 4 shots per 75 possessions in the playoffs. He's also quick enough on his feet to close back out to the three-point line for outstanding contests on shooters, and in many cases even contains them on attacks off the catch. This versatility, not just from Rob, but the rest of the roster, is what makes the Celtics defense so damning. Their bigs can defend in space, their wings and guards can switch on to bigger players, and in many cases offer strong paint resistance, and they have near perfect rotations and positioning across the board, leaving very little weaknesses. As a result, they posted the best defense in the NBA last year, a mark that improved even more come playoff time. And holding opponents to more than 7 points below their average offensive rating was good for top 40 in postseason history. Now, the same can't really be said for their play on the other side of the ball. They're not by any means a bad offensive team, but as we saw with their complete collapse in the finals, they are leaving quite a bit to be desired. When they were met with such a disciplined, versatile defensive team in Golden State, they just couldn't break it down or generate nearly as many advantages as we had seen them do against other units. In my opinion, the main reason for this lack of creation was that while yes, they do have lots of passing, shooting, and scoring pressure, there's only one player who really puts them together to actually force aggressive coverages and capitalize as a playmaker. Just look at the guys playing big playoff minutes. Marcus Smart is a very capable passer and decision maker who moves the ball well and has some nice attacks off the catch, but he's not really providing the scoring punch needed to force heavy rotations or collapses, serving as more of a connective piece. The same goes for Al Horford, Derek White, and Rob Williams, who can all connect the offense through their passing, but again aren't really creating many opportunities. They do have someone who is that level of scorer though in Jaylen Brown, and his ability to punish the opposition from all 3 levels does warrant some extra attention. With that being said though, his handle does really hurt his ability to get deep into those pressure points that force a breakdown, and he's still not a strong enough passer to consistently generate open shots for others. That leaves you with one guy capable of creating consistent offense for both himself and his teammates in Jason Tatum. Don't get me wrong, he's taken huge steps forward as a lead playmaker over the last 2 seasons, but he's still not that one-man heliocentric engine. So when the Warriors found ways to make things a bit more difficult, there wasn't a secondary guy that could keep Boston's offense afloat. So what'd they do in the offseason immediately following this loss? Traded for a guy whose 2 biggest strengths are pressuring the rim and making plays. Malcolm Brogdon isn't a super explosive athlete. He does have some burst and quick changes of direction, but it's nothing to write home about. What he lacks as an athlete though, he makes up for with his methodical approach to driving the ball. He has a strong handle, using hesitations and tight crossovers to attack with changes of pace, and he's great at finding and choosing the correct angle to get by defenders or get them on his hip. At a pretty strong 6'5", with a 6'11" wingspan, he also has a pretty nice size and length advantage over most perimeter defenders, making it easier to get all the way to the rim and convert when he's there. He's a solid but still questionable finisher, showing some nice touch and often going to reverse layups to avoid contests. That's because he can't really get the ball over or through bigger paint defenders and isn't good at all with contact, avoiding it as much as possible. He also tends to pick up his dribble earlier than most elite slashers, whereas some guys tend to get deeper into the paint and force more attention. He'll commonly settle for a deep floater or mid-range jumper. Take this play for example. He comes off a screen that puts Rose on his hip with Robinson in drop coverage, and instead of taking advantage of that 2-on-1 situation and forcing a commitment, that little help from RJ Barrett at the nail is enough to make him pick up his dribble and go to a floater. He does make the shot at a pretty decent rate, as is the case with his pull-up mid-range jump shot, but again, just an extra dribble or two in these tight quarters would allow him to break down the defense so much more effectively. That's not to say he isn't still a very capable downhill playmaker though. He's a pretty quick and high value decision maker who feels out help well and usually makes the right pass. He excels at finding shooters, consistently making sharp kick out deliveries with brisk releases and even having some cross court capability. He's also great at dumping the ball off to cutters or laying it down to bigs near the basket, which makes me more than excited for the type of opportunities he'll be able to create for Rob Williams down low. However, his interior passing is still relatively limited. He's not a guy who makes a ton of pocket passes through tight windows or timely, soft touch lobs over the top. As a result, he's not creating a ton of layups or dunks, but also isn't really turning the ball over much at all, which I think better suits him as a second or third offensive option as opposed to the ball dominant offense they had him running in Indiana. If we take a look at how his overall downhill game performs in various metrics, you'll notice how many shots he's able to create for both himself and others, and I expect that shot quality to improve quite a bit now that he's playing in a much better situation. The one major question mark that comes to mind when looking at his offensive game is the outside shooting, which is just all over the place. In some seasons looking like a really capable 3-point shot maker, and in others not so much. I'm not sure how much this swings me on his overall offensive value, but I do think it'll play into the effectiveness of the role I'm expecting him to play in Boston. I think we'll see somewhat of a hybrid between his days in Milwaukee and Indiana. That growth as a playmaker surely gets him some reps as an initiator, especially in the pick and roll, but not to the degree of almost every single possession like we've seen over the past few years. If you remember, back in 2019, he was more of a spot-up shooter than anything, and while that near 43% from 3 does stand out, what impresses me most about that time is how good he was at generating paint touches off the catch. This is a huge skill to have when playing in an offense that has two other very strong scorers and tons of capable connectors, just completely breaking down a defense that's already out of position. If he can get that outside shooting to be just a bit more consistent, I view him as a near perfect offensive fit with relatively the entire roster, and especially good at maximizing the skills that both of the Jays provide. Before we get into how I expect him to look defensively, I want to give a quick shout out to Basketball Index for helping with this analysis and the making of this video. If you're not familiar with the site, they provide tons of statistical measurements, tools, and easily accessible graphics to further guide your understanding of the sport. Earlier in this breakdown, I referenced just a few of their talent grades, and through their player profiles tab, I can easily compare them to other players around the league. Using Malcolm Brogdon's finishing as an example, on this page I'm presented with various metrics detailing his ability to create and make these shots, along with how he stacks up against his peers. This is just one of the many useful tools found on the site that help guide me and many others through their analysis, and by signing up with the code VENUE30, you can get 30% off your first month subscription. I'll leave a link in the description below for anyone interested in signing up, and with that being said, let's take a look at Malcolm Brogdon's defense. He's at his best on the ball, using his size and length to bother perimeter creators, and even offering some positional versatility. He's also a good screen navigator, which just adds another player capable of defending at the point of attack when needed. Where he's not really offering much of anything is away from the ball. Despite his physical tools, he doesn't provide much paint defense or rim protection at all, which comes primarily as a result of his lack of engagement as a helper. I'm not sure how much this lack of attention can be chalked up to a pretty poor context with an overworked offensive load, and I wonder if playing in lineups where he's constantly surrounded by nothing but high quality defenders will bring more out of him. I'm not expecting him to all of a sudden become a defensive playmaker, as he just doesn't have that type of anticipation or phenomenal hands, but if he completely buys into the system, I feel like there's a chance he could bring some positive value. For that reason, there's only one glaring issue with Malcolm Brogdon to me, and that's his health. He's only played more than 64 games in a season once in his entire career, and has missed more than 80 games over the past 3 years. Considering they didn't really give up any huge assets to obtain him though, this does seem like a pretty low risk, high reward type of deal that contending teams need to take to push them over the edge. A few other questions that arise with this roster are Robert Williams and his own consistent history of injuries, Al Horford's age and whether he has enough juice to author another run like the one we saw from him just a few months ago, and how their young guys will actually progress and grow over the coming years. What I will say though is that if this roster finds themselves fully healthy come playoff time in 2023, to me they are the best team in basketball and my pick to win next year's NBA Finals. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website, podcast, and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Boston Celtics and just how good you believe they are. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.